Ah, finally, one episode that doesn't have any controversy in it. Wait.
Consider this your spoiler warning. If you haven't watched this week's episode of BattleBots, proceed at your own risk.
This week we talked to Matt from Kraken after his first televised main event fight. We also discuss amongst ourselves about the most boring and potentially controversial match of the season so far. And we talked to Emmanuel from Big Dill to find out why his robot's such a big deal.
For shame, Michael, for shame. I'm Will Bales from Hypershock.
We're Mike and Andrea Galately from Team Witch Doctor.
And this is the Tale of the Tape After Show. Welcome to the Tale of the Tape After Show. If you're like us, you probably spent all week watching new content of BattleBots. That's because this week set a record with over 260 minutes of brand new BattleBots fights.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a whole new show that you have to watch now called BattleBots Bounty Hunters, only available on Discovery Plus, which just released on Monday. To give you a quick preview, BattleBots Bounty Hunters is separate from the competition. It's a totally different thing, and there's mini tournaments up against some of the biggest legends like Witch Doctor and Tombstone and Ice Wave. And 8 robots go up against each other to try to fight the bounty, and whoever wins gets their share of 25 grand. So it's a lot of fun. We were in one. No spoilers, but it's great. It's really well done.
Yeah, we've watched just the bounties that have been posted so far, and they've been a blast to watch. But for now, let's jump right into the 30-second recap to get into this week's episode of BattleBots.
30 seconds on the clock.
Claw Viper whiffs his box rush and pays the price. Ghost Raptor's weapon hits the eject button. Grabot makes like Tony Hawk and grabs some sick airtime.
Huge parks his bike at a conveniently placed arena-side bike rack for his fight against Hydra. Fusion shows the bulletproof and BattleBot-proof materials aren't quite the same thing. And Lockjaw teaches us how to make relish. And Kraken sacrifices its narwhal to get its first main event win.
In this week's Deep Dive segment, we're going to start by talking to team captain of Big Dill, Emmanuel Carrillo.
So some fans may recognize me as the driver of Mad Catter, but I've been on the show for a little while. I'm the designer of Warhawk. So the first version of Warhawk I did. I've also kind of been a part of the King of Bots scene. So I've been to both This Is Fighting Robots and King of Bots 2. But always kind of as a background character. There's a lot of people on these teams that do a lot of work on these robots. They just if you're not the captain, you kind of don't get put on TV. And so this year I had the opportunity to captain my own team, pretty much because of COVID. The Warhawk team wasn't going to be able to make it out. I could have still driven Mad Catter if I wanted to, but having the opportunity to come in and pilot a team kind of sets me up down the road if I want to come back in a normal year and kind of keep going with the iterations of the Big Dill. Now, one of the things people notice this year is the Big Dill looks like Warhawk, and that's because it kind of is. So Warhawk originally, back in the very first season, was meant to be modular. So we had both a lifter and a vertical spinner. And turns out when you bring a modular bot to a competition, most often the vertical spinner is the best choice. So we never even ran the lifter. I don't think we even put it together. So it kind of sat around for a few years. And this year, for Robot Ruckus, I wanted to bring a robot to that competition. I put that module back together. I modified it to fit the new chassis and ran that. And that's kind of essentially how Big Dill came to be. Yeah, so we went from fighting one of the newest teams to fighting, one of the old school legends in Donald. And to me, it was great. Donald is, to me, kind of a control bot. It's always kind of driven control bot. So like Lockjaw is the green lifter. And it was kind of funny that we got paired up with him, kind of what his bot used to be versus the new school Lockjaw. And it was a great match. I'll post a little video. The lifter seemed to stop working in the match. We power cycled it. It just started working right back up. early on in one of the matches, we got, in those first hits, something happened. It jammed up our drive. I think we lost our front left wheel. And unfortunately, like, Big Dill is kind of designed, not designed in the, optimally for the lifter. So there's a lot of weight in those pontoons and that wedge. And so it drives essentially only on its front wheels. And as soon as we lost one of those wheels, or one of those wheels kind of jammed up, we were almost immobile. If you watch the match again, we're kind of barely moving around. It's just because we're driving on one wheel. Those back ones are there if we ever get flipped over on Warhawk. But with Big Dill, it's not an issue because we just flip ourselves back over. So just architecturally, it's not necessarily the best robot for a lifter. But we lost all these parts. Side rail, 2 gearboxes actually. One was a motor's cracked or magnets cracked, and another one was the output of the motor itself sheared. But the cool thing is we have 2 robots. So we just, to put that one to the side, swapped back in a different module, and we were good to go in a few hours. So one of the fun things about Big Dill is that we claim that we're the most powerful lifter in BattleBots. We might not use that power the most effectively out of all the lifters, but our system is powered by 2 long mags into an apex. So most people run half of that. They use 1 long mag into an apex. That's how Slam Mal works. That's how Whiplash works. But we went Hypershock and we YOLO'd it. So we went 2 into 1, more power than any lifter needs on the show. No one on the show really gets to look inside these robots, and there's a lot of cool stuff. To me, this is the one thing on Big Dill that I kind of try to show off to people is this lifter gearbox, just because it's absurd, but it's kind of the one part of the robot that I think is fun to show off to builders. So the pickle puns are kind of an unintended consequence, not even a consequence, like an unintended benefit of kind of being named the Big Dill. So all my robots are food-based themed, so I'm Team Food Fight. So, we have things like the Big Smack, Pizza Slicer, just kind of fun food things. Just thought it was a little bit more fun than the kind of the scary, tombstones and ghost raptors and things like that, where, at least at smaller competitions, having kids yell like pizza at the arena to me was always fun. But the fun thing is, even Chris and Kenny are having fun with the food puns and kind of trying to work that in. So, I had a list of things that I tried to sneak in when possible. But one of the ones that I heard afterwards was "That's delightful." And to me, it's just like so subtle that I love it. That's like my favorite kind of pickle pun. But if people or viewers have any suggestions for good pickle puns, put them in the comments, and I will try to sneak them in next year, because by the end of the show, I was running out. I didn't have the deep list of pickle puns that I needed for all these interviews, and so I was trying not to repeat myself. But going forward, if you guys have any pickle puns, let me know, and I will definitely try to make a list of them and try to work them in next year.
All right, for our next deep dive, let's talk about that fight. Yeah, so this is...
Hi. I have things to say. Can I have a card?
Yeah. This is Kyle, everybody. He's another Hypershock team member. He's great. He's unique. All right, so before we go too far, I do want to point out, remember 2 episodes ago when I said that there was another fight that hadn't happened yet when we're talking about Beta Rotator? This is that fight. In real time, Hydra and Huge fought before Beta and Rotator, so maybe you understand where some of the frustration was coming from.
We warned you.
Now, as a lot of people have posted, because there have been a lot of angry comments about this match, there's nothing in the BattleBots rules currently that requires you to use your active weapon. So in both cases with Hydra and with Beta, they are not breaking any rules. However, as builders, there is a a spirit of the sport and an understood agreement between gentlemen or gentlewomen when we engage in duels such as these.
Now, there's not a rule that says you have to use your weapon, but the judging criteria specifically states that you have to use your weapon in order to get damage and aggression points. And I think Kyle wants to weigh in on this.
So there's a video that we put out where Greg talks about how control bots can score damage points by using the hazards. I feel that has been misinterpreted a lot of different ways. People keep talking about how control bots should just score free aggression points by using the hazards. What I think was meant, in a way a lot of us have interpreted that, is damage. Control bots can use the hazards to do damage, therefore scoring those damage points.
And the BattleBots rules spell this out. It defines damage as actually having to damage the other robot. It's not the illusion of damage. Right. It has to be physical damage to the robot, which we saw Huge get hammered a couple of times. Huge suffered no damage from that, and at least as far as I could tell.
Yeah, another thing, when it goes to getting into the nitty-gritty about points, there's a rule that you cannot get all 3 aggression points without using your active weapon. So in all of our armchair assessing of this fight, keep in mind that Hydra cannot get all 3 aggression points.
So, like you said, our interpretation of the rules is that you have to use your active weapon to score these points. We think it's pretty clear. It's not being judged that way, but that's neither here nor there because it's pretty subjective. However, what really bugged me about this match, and I didn't notice this at the time because now with audio we can see what Jake was actually saying and what the ref was saying, Jake is actually engaging and arguing with the ref and refusing to back off during the match.
BattleBots doesn't really define what releasing is. We've seen in other fights where the robot is told to release and they release their grab on the other robot, but they might be still holding on, or they might have released, the other robot keeps driving into them. So we don't currently have a good strict definition of what releasing is beyond, okay, stop trying to hold them, but if you're still in contact or if you're still restricting their movement, have you really released?
I hate the precedent that this sets because usually, most of the teams, I would have said 100% of the teams before this match, if the ref tells you to do something, you do it because you're in the middle of the match, they're the ref, that's how it works. If we're establishing a precedent now that you can argue back to the ref, and we saw the first warning we've ever seen on BattleBots. I don't know if BattleBots has a warning system or if this was so unprecedented that they just didn't have a plan for this and didn't know what to do. But imagine if everybody argued with the ref when there were decisions like this. We just fought Kraken in this episode who grabbed us many times. And I really appreciate, looking at this, that when he was told to release, he did, and he backed off. And it made for a much better fight.
It's hard being a ref, it's hard being a judge, and they're doing their best. But yeah, I think you made a really good point, Andrea, that this was unprecedented. I don't think John had a plan for what the consequence was going to be for his warning. I mean, no one expected this fight. I think a lot of people expected it to be more exciting, maybe more like previous efforts to use de-icers and us with the rakes and other robots in the past who have added attachments to try to stiff arm other robots. It starts that way, and then you try to use your active weapon. But we didn't see that in this fight, and I think that's where a lot of people are frustrated with the decision and the judge's decision.
Yeah, the other part of it for me is what makes good TV, right? Like, everybody wants to have a good, entertaining match. Obviously, there's people who are there to compete to win. There are people who are there with the understanding that we're there to film a television show, and the viewers are the ones that really appreciate a 3-minute slugfest or a technical grappling type match. But to me, I think this was just a kind of a cop-out win for Hydra, not using his flipper, and I don't think he really had any intention of ever using his flipper.
So there's a loophole in the rules. There's a controversy of the judge's decision. But to me, what really makes me hate this fight is just Jake's blatant disregard for the ref having any sort of authority over the match and the precedent that sets for the builders. So while I think Jake is a great guy and we've been defending him since he called us overrated a few episodes ago, we're friends with Jake. Jake and I are actually the same age. We've been competing together since BattleBots IQ, a decade ago. After our disc broke in this episode, we went to Jake and consulted with him, and he helped us out with some advice on weapon material. We see him playing with his son You know,
this is adorable. Watch this video.
So, asked the boys to get ready this morning. This has been playing over and over because the little one enjoys the music, and it doesn't look like we'll be leaving anytime soon for our events today. I'm gonna have to start throwing it a few warnings, I think, but he might not listen.
so as you can see here, even though real life Jake is a great guy, I'm really not liking TV Jake. He's kind of a jerk.
So at this point, what really matters is, what do fans want? I mean, what do you want? Do you want to see fights like this? Do you want to see wins like this? You know, tell us in the comments.
For our last deep dive, I think it's time to talk about our main event fight versus Kraken. I have to say, with all the hateful comments that we've seen out of the Hydra and Huge fight, the comments that we've seen out of this main event fight are the exact opposite. This is probably the most wholesome reaction I've ever seen to any of our fight or anybody's fight. A lot of the comments start with, I love both teams, why can't you both just win? So there's been a lot of positive reactions to Kraken's first main event and first win. And surprisingly, not a lot of hate for us having the same problem again with our weapon disc. So to tell us more about the new and improved Kraken that we're seeing this season, which has been very impressive so far, here's Matt.
Hey everyone, it's Matt Spurk with Team Kraken. We just finished episode 5, and a lot of people had some questions about Kraken. And if you were a fan of BattleBots for the past couple years, you know in 2018, Kraken had kind of a rough start. So we've come a long way from that robot in 2018 to where we're at now. So we learned from the first season in 2018 to 2019 that getting stuck on your head is a really bad way to lose. So that was like the major design feature. So that's why Kraken's got kind of that rounded back. And you notice that when she gets flipped over, she just rolls right back onto her wheels. So it's a passive self-righting system. And so we made that big change from 2018 to 2019, and then 2019 to 2020, the robot looks very similar. That's because the frame is exactly the same, but the insides were revamped. So the drivetrain's the same as it was in 2018 and 2019. That seemed to be working for us. But the pneumatics are completely redone. So in 2019, last season, we had one air tank in there, and that allowed us to get about 6 bites. And we noticed, though, while we were testing, that with one air tank, the bite was really slow. It took about 5 seconds to get a full bite. And that's too slow. The robots could get into the mouth, they could get back out before the jaw would really fully close down on them. So the big change this year was we added a second air tank, which about almost doubled the speed of the bite. So from full open to full close is now about 2 to 2.5 seconds. So it's much improved. And it also, obviously, you got 2 air tanks, you have twice as much air. So now we're able to get around 12 full pressure bites, and then we can get a 13th and a 14th bite. And we shouldn't ever really need that many bites, right? So we can hold our opponent for 30 seconds, like they say on the show. So we really only need 6 bites, as long as we land them all. But having a couple spares in case we miss is kind of an important part. And so obviously the crushing mechanism for Kraken is one of the most important parts. It's one of the most unique robot parts about Kraken. Kraken is the only pneumatic crusher that has ever competed on BattleBots. And so, see, this guy here is our airbag. And it's, we call it an airbag, but it's really more appropriately called a heavy lifting bag. So these airbags, they're very flat. It's only about 3/4 of an inch thick, but it's 15 inches square. And they use these airbags in rock quarries to split big slabs of granite apart. They also use them, paramedics and EMTs will use them if they've got someone trapped under a vehicle. They can slide a board through the windows of the car and put one of these bags on each side, and it inflates, and that can lift the vehicle off of the person so they can pull them out. So this bag here is designed to be run at about 100 psi, 116 I think is its pressure for this one. And it can produce around 20,000 pounds of force, which is what Kraken ran, which we ran it at 100 psi. We produced around 20,000 pounds of force in the Crusher our very first season. We worked with the manufacturer of this bag and found out that these bags can actually take significantly higher than their rated pressure. They can actually go to 5 times their rated pressure. And our really great sponsor, Rental Tools Online, hooked us up with even higher pressure airbags for this season. So those airbags we can actually run up to 750 psi before we get into kind of the burst range. So we were able to increase the pressure to 300 psi in 2019, and we ran it at 300 psi again in 2020. And so that crushing mechanism, as this bag fills with air, it fills up almost like a big throw pillow. So it goes from 3/4 of an inch when it's fully deflated to almost 8 inches thick. Actually, it can get to 8 inches thick. We don't ever get quite that thick because kind of the downside of the pneumatic lifting bags is they're very neat. The technology we can fill, we're still trying to get to be the fastest, most powerful crusher ever, and we're still evolving to get there. But as the airbag inflates, it actually loses force. So the key for us is to have the airbag and the jaws positioned at just the right height above our opponent, that as soon as we start to bite, we're engaging on them. So that's why Kraken actually has 2 different sets of teeth. The large teeth that we used against Black Dragon and Witch Doctor are 6 inches long, and then we have stubby teeth that we use for robots that are much taller, and those are only 3 inches tall, so much shorter. This year was obviously a different year than normal. Normally when we head out to California, we have one of the biggest teams, up to 13 team members. But obviously with the COVID restrictions this year, and we had to downsize our team anyway, and there was a lot of folks that just didn't feel comfortable heading out to California at the time. So it was just myself, my father-in-law, and my dad, and it was a unique experience. It was cool. It was like a father-son bonding trip for the 3 of us, and fortunately we all get along really well. But it was certainly weird, just not having as many hands to help you with things. Just lifting the robot up and down from the cart, which is the 3 of us, got quite laborious by the end. Our backs were ready for the time off, but that didn't mean we didn't have people helping. So back home, the teeth on Kraken are all hammer forged. We've hammer forged them out in the driveway. And we just have a coal-fired forge, and we go out there and we get the metal hot and we hit it with hammers, and that's how the big teeth on Kraken are made, and then all the little teeth that we make down the jaw were all made the same way. And everybody gets to put their hammer mark, so to speak, on Kraken. And this fight with the Witch Doctor, it was our first main event, so it was really exciting. It was just one of those like, wow, this is a great opportunity for us. Wow, we're gonna get creamed. And so it was one of those, just a ton of different emotions, and it's why we made Kraken. It's the kind of fight that we go there to have. It was back and forth. There were periods of time where we were in control. There were periods of time where they were in control. There was a little bit of damage and destruction, and it was just really a fun fight to be a part of. So I was really excited about it, and obviously getting the win doesn't hurt either. So that was nice.
So obviously our weapon disc broke again in this fight, just like it did in the Hydra match, but this time it broke on the very first hit against Kraken. And Kraken's very well designed, and he's specifically designed to bite robots just like us, and essentially his mouth is a triangle. So when a spinning weapon, a circle, goes right into this triangle, it essentially gets wedged in there. And we've got a couple of great pictures of the aftermath of our fight with him and some of the damage to his mouth area. And basically what happened is our weapon essentially got jammed in there, and the tooth couldn't take that force anymore and just flew off. So clearly we have a recurring issue with our material choice. And as I say in our post-fight interview, obviously we're distraught at this point. We chalked up our broken disc in the first fight to getting thrown a bunch of times, the new arena floor. We got hammered. You know, there was kind of a lot of reasons to write it off, but clearly we need to address this going forward.
So at this point, we have about 24 hours to source material, get it cut, and get it installed on our robot before the next match, all in the middle of a pandemic in Long Beach, California. So we'll talk more about the details of whether we make that happen or not. But for now, we are working frantically to fix this issue.
This Chris Roast of the Week comes from an unlikely source, from TV Daddy. Man, that's rough. Can you imagine getting roasted by your boss's boss?
It's like your boss's boss's boss. Ooh, tagged by Discovery. Cool, let's check that. Oh, wait.
For everyone that was curious whether or not it made good TV.
Here's Behind the Bots with this week's fan question.
Hey everybody, it's Luke from Behind the Bots with this week's top fan question, sent in from Francois, who asks, how can thin blades like jackpots have such an effect, and huge ones like ghost raptors make so few damages? Great question, Francois.
I guess that's a little bit of comparing apples and oranges, but you can look at, given robots and look at their different configurations.
Yeah, I mean, some robots like Hypershock and Tombstone has been really famous for doing this, actually have different thickness weapons for different kinds of opponents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do it for a lot of reasons, but I'm guessing that you want to go to the technical T-Rex or something.
What a great idea. Let's throw this one to technical T-Rex.
Sure. What? I don't care. Whatever. It's fine.
Technical T-Rex, technical T-Rex. The T in T-Rex stands for technical.
Each team chooses their spinning weapon tooth design based on their goals and strategies. Do they want to slice through their opponents and go deep beyond their armor? A thin and sharp weapon like jackpots will deliver lots of energy over a small area, which allows them to cut into the toughest armor. Do they want to hit hard, bend armor, and send robots flying? A thick, blunt weapon like uppercuts will transfer as much energy as possible into their opponent, throwing them into the air and imparting blunt force trauma. In other words, for a given weight and speed, the thinner blade will have a smaller area and therefore a greater pressure, breaking through armor. The thicker blade will have a greater area and therefore a smaller pressure, allowing them to transfer more energy and launch their opponents across their arena.
Thank you, Technical T-Rex, for your service.
I don't care anymore.
Now it's time for tonight's Thing of the Week. Feels of the Week. That's a good one after what we've been through with Hydra this week.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely liked when Brady and Logan had their little cute moment. It was heartfelt.
Nice father-son moment. I particularly liked Kraken's win against us. Was very genuine.
Liked that?
Huh?
You liked it?
I mean, I like Matt's reaction. It was a very genuine reaction. He really looked like it was a big relief for him to get his first main event fight and his first main event win against 2019 runner-up and overrated robot Witch Doctor.
See, even on BattleBots, the good always outweighs the bad.
Aww. Aww.
Aww.
And that's our show. And as usual, we have a little montage where this time you can watch a narwhal get eaten to death by a kraken.
interesting enough, when we came up with the concept of Wally, I wasn't thinking Wally. I was gonna make a harpoon gun. It was gonna be a little robot with a harpoon, like air-powered cannon that would shoot a harpoon out and try and shoot the other person, because the BattleBots had made it legal to have cannons.
If you haven't seen this week's episode of BattleBots, proceed at your own risk.
Dun, dun, dun. All right, in our next deep dive, let's talk about that fight. Yes, that one. You're supposed to interrupt me. Hello?
Hello.
Cut.
He's still so short.
2 steps ahead of you.
All right, well, Kyle's on my side now.
Nah, the 5G can still get in. Gotta make tighter.
You gotta do the front.
You look like a delicious lasagna.
It's gotta look like a conquistador.